All right, what is up, everyone? Welcome into another episode of Inside the Hoosier Mind. It is a very, very beautiful day, at least here in the Midwest. And I know my other guest with me here, Jonathan, is enjoying the beautiful Florida, which I just got to come back home from a few days ago. And the stage is set for our Super Bowl in the NFL. We have the Kansas City Chiefs versus Jonathan's San Francisco 49ers. Jonathan, how are you feeling after your 49ers came back from what we thought was going to be an absolute blowout win? They managed to come back and win it 34-31. What are your thoughts, sir?
How's it going, Tony? I'm glad to be here. Oh, I'm sorry, Tony. I forgot to turn on my cam. My bad.
It's all good. It's all good. There we go. There we go.
My bad, Tony. I apologize for being rude, for being a guest, but I got a lot to say to everybody on there who hated this man right here. Number 13, Brock Purdy, last pick of the draft. I think he answered the last question, Tony, because the last question, I heard a lot of chatter. Heard a lot of chatter in the playoffs. Heard people saying stuff like, oh, I want to see him come back from a deficit in the fourth quarter. Well, he did that, and it still wasn't good enough. And then I heard, well, Keyshawn Johnson said, well, it really is only 4 points. You know, Keyshawn's voice is a little high. It's really only 4 points. You know, is that really a comeback? And Brock Purdy said, bet. And so he went down 17 points and came back in the second half and pulled it out with his arm, with his legs, throw it. He got a little lucky. I will admit that. He got a little lucky on that long pass, but he still did it, and he pulled through. And now Brock Purdy, the last pick in the draft, the person that Amy Trask said wasn't even a terrific quarterback in the playoffs, has topped all of those quarterbacks and is going to play Patrick Mahomes in the Super Bowl. Do you understand what we're looking at here? Mr. Irrelevant in the Super Bowl. Do you know, Tony, Mr. Irrelevant didn't throw a pass in the NFL before this year. Did you know that?
Yeah.
Did you know that? Not only did he throw a pass, he threw a pass and led his team to the NFC Championship game. He tore his UCL, which is a season career ender, comes back. Not only does he lead the team to the NFC Championship game again, but he leads the league in every quarterback metric that matters.
Mm-hmm.
He comes from behind in the playoffs and is now in the Super Bowl. We're looking at history here. I'm feeling great, Tony. How are you?
I'm good, man. So I will say too, much to your defense, because we talked about it, a few episodes ago and a few weeks ago, the biggest question that people had about Brock Purdy was, could he be the guy to lead his team from a comeback? There had been very few games that the 49ers had been in to where there was a question of, could Brock Purdy lead them from a comeback? We saw it against Cleveland. He ends up, they lose the game because of a Jake Moody missed field goal. He ends up losing against the Vikings. He ends up losing against the Bengals. Now, 2 weeks in a row, both against the Packers and now against the Lions, albeit the Packers wasn't nearly as big of a deficit as it was with the Lions being down 24-7. Brock Purdy is able to keep a calm, cool, collected head and ends up leading his team, go ahead for the victory. So do you think that now kind of silences a lot of the doubt and a lot of the haters have? Because I know you've talked about how there's been a lot of kind of negative stigma and a lot of hate against Purdy because he's Mr. Irrelevant. He's not talked about in the MVP conversation because he's not a first-round draft pick, because he's not the big talented quarterback. He hasn't had to really overcome any type of adversity because he's on and surrounded by such a talented team. Do you think this silences and doubts all of the haters on Brock Purdy now?
I mean, it damn sure better. Well, what else does the kid have to do? He's in his second year.
Yeah.
He's in his second year, and he led the team to a Super Bowl. Never mind. Let me take my shades off now that the formalities are out of the way. This kid's in his second year, and he's in the Super Bowl. And what he came from behind against Cleveland. The kicker missed the field goal. He came from behind against the Green Bay team that dismantled Dallas at home. Dismantled Dallas at home. Coming in hot with the better quarterback, and all it took was half of a good quarter from Brock Purdy to beat the Packers.
Yeah.
And then he came back from 17. We all thought the game was over, Tony. We thought that game was over at halftime. I'm looking at my wife like, it doesn't look good. Another NFC Championship let down for Niners fans. 17 points down,
Mm-hmm.
and he
Yeah,
came back.
I saw your post about that too. You were like, you were so upset at halftime about being a 49ers fan. You're like, man, it's all over again. Like it's a repeat of last year.
Yeah, I thought it was done. I thought this was it. Maybe I was prisoner to what had happened in sports media. That is on me. I will apologize to Brock Purdy for not, after everything that he did, not believing in this kid and following through. That is my bad. Trust me, that will never happen again, because I think the Niners have answered the final test. Brock Purdy has answered the final question on the test. That question was, can he come from behind late? Kyle Shanahan was 0-30.
Yep.
0-30, trailing 7 points in the fourth quarter. Not only did Brock do it once, he followed up and did it again in a different round of the playoffs. In the playoffs? Are you serious right now? If you doubt at this point, we can't help you. We cannot help you. You're just going to hate for the rest of your career.
Right. So let's kind of dive real quick into the other side, and we'll dive a little bit deeper into what your thoughts are for the Super Bowl. But let's dive into the other side with the Lions. So I know we've talked about it, and I've talked about it before on different shows with people, of Dan Campbell's aggressiveness to go for it almost every single time it's fourth down, especially fourth and short. He did it at least twice in this championship game and left potentially at minimum 6 points on the board, maybe even more, depending on what they would potentially be able to do if the drives had been able to be sustained and continue to go on. Do you think it was almost kind of a foolish thing by Dan Campbell to do that? Because I've made that argument against him when it was Dallas versus Detroit, the whole controversial call of whether or not Decker actually reported as eligible or not. They put number 70 Skipper in as eligible, and of course the 2-point conversion fails. He then gets a second chance to go, either kick the PAT or go for two. He decides to go for it again. Micah Parson lines up off sides. They're back to basically where they were to start with, and then it's actually an incompletion. So he had 3 separate attempts to kick the PAT to at least tie it, send it overtime. He didn't do it. This time, Detroit's finally in an NFC championship game for the first time in 30 years. They're up big, and they continue to try to be aggressive, but it's almost as if they started to take their foot off the gas pedal, and they start to lean back a little bit like, yeah, we should be comfortable. We don't think San Francisco can kind of make this comeback. Do you think that was a mistake by Dan Campbell, that he led this team so far, they did so well, and then to basically blow what essentially was the game? Because, I mean, like you said, they were ahead 17 points at one point. It was 24-7. We thought the game was over.
Right.
What's your thoughts with Dan Campbell and the Lions?
I think Dan Campbell was just being who he had been all season. Honestly, he had always gone for it on fourth.
Yeah.
This is the difference between good regular season coaches and championship winning coaches. This is the difference, because in the regular season, there's always another game. You can gamble on this one, lose this game, you learn. Hopefully, you come back next week, and hopefully, we don't make the same mistakes. But in the playoffs, it's one and done.
Yep.
And especially in a game where you're up 17 points, and this team who is at home, the crowd is now back in it. They're surging. You guys on defense can't seem to find an answer for anybody, really.
Mm-hmm.
The Lady Luck isn't even on your side, where you got an interception bounce off the face mask of one of your defenders and into the hands of the receiver. You have to make better decisions to stop the bleeding. And it's easy for us to say, from our couches, we're not the ones on the field. But, excuse me, even during the surge, I'm looking at my family and I'm saying the Lions are melting down in these playoffs. They are melting down.
Yeah.
And at the beginning of the third quarter, you essentially had a W. San Francisco went down the field and only kicked the field goal.
Yeah.
Now you have it. You're marching down the field. Why are you not kicking the field goal? It's still a 17-point game, and essentially the first 2 drives is a wash, and you put the pressure back on a Brock Purdy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Instead, you go for it on fourth. Your receiver drops it. Unfortunate, but that happens. And you miss it. And now, not only do they have the ball back, they're in plus territory. The crowd is back in it, and you're giving Christian McCaffrey and Deebo Samuel and Trent Williams and Brock Purdy, who has led the league, number 1 rated QB, according to QBR. That's not me biased. That's the facts according to PFF and everybody who does QB metrics. You're giving the number 1 rated quarterback in the league the ball back with momentum on the positive side of the field. I don't understand it. And not only did you not do it once, you then doubled up and did it again. What was it, 4th and 2?
Yeah.
And you're on the 49ers side of the field. Now it's a 7-point game, and you're going for it again. Kick the field goal, put the pressure back on the other team. But this is the difference. Because Kyle Shanahan, even down 17 points, kicked the field goals.
Yeah.
And his kicker missed one. So he kicked the field goals because this is a championship coach. And that is the difference between the coaching staffs here.
Yeah. And I agree with you because, like I said, I thought the same thing with Dallas when he had 3 opportunities to send it into overtime, at least give your team a chance at that point. If they win it, they win. If they lose, they lose. And I know for a lot of us, and like you said, sitting on our couches, we can say this because it's a 50-50 shot. If he gets it, he's a genius. If he doesn't, you messed up once again. And that to me is what really, like you said, with Dan, you have to be careful with a championship game like that. You're already ahead. Yes, I see you want to be aggressive. I see you want to potentially get more and, make this happen. But you also have to take points where you can get them. Because like you said, once you do that, then the pressure, if you're able to score, the pressure goes back to Brock Purdy. Now, since you missed it, the pressure then turns to your defense. And when your defense doesn't come up, then you're in trouble. That was the other thing that I didn't understand. It's like, okay, you're up by 17, kick the field goal. You then go up by 20. Okay. Then the 49ers have to respond. Even if they respond with a touchdown, it's still a 1-score game. So you're still in it. And you don't potentially lose all the momentum for when you do mess this up. You go for it twice on 4th down, you don't get it. That was just to me kind of the biggest blunder. And I know everybody's going to criticize him for it. Everybody's going to hate on him for it. And again, it's a 50-50 shot. If he gets it, great. If not, you're an idiot. To me, when you're in a championship game, and like you said, when you're in this one and done mentality, because that's the reality of the situation, you have to play smarter. You have to coach smarter. And it's, again, I appreciate the aggressiveness because, again, 9 times out of 10, you may or may not get it. But that one time you don't, that's what hurts you the most. So I
think that the criticism is warranted because in the playoffs, it's about moments.
Yes.
And one moment can make the difference between you continuing and you going home. One moment in the playoffs. In the regular season, you got a couple of moments, and if you fail, there's always next week. But in the playoffs, it's one play. It's one moment, one decision, one play. And we watched that happen this past weekend with 2 different games. With 2 different games, we watched that happen. We'll talk about the AFC here in a second, but Lamar was 3rd and 1. 3rd and 1, and the line opened up for him. What got him into the playoffs? Him using his legs. He did not run. The lane was right there. What are you doing? Dan Campbell, it's 4th and 2. You're on the San Francisco side of the field. It's a kick that your kicker can make. He's expected to make it at this point in his career. What are you doing? You have no momentum. The crowd is back in it. The defense is back in it. You haven't been running the ball really well in the second half. What are you doing? And that one moment, that decision that he made the difference in the game. Because if he kicks that field goal, and let's just say, I know this is improbable, but let's just say the rest of the game played out the way that it did, we're in overtime.
Then it's a different story.
He didn't kick the field goal. The Niners came back. Not only did they score a field goal, they scored a touchdown. And then now it's a 7-point game. Now the pressure's on you because the crowd is back in it and the defense is back in it. And the 49ers have now built confidence because they're watching their young quarterback put the team on his back and take them in. And they say, we just need to give him the ball back. If we give him the ball back, we're going to walk away with this thing. And that's exactly what happened. This was a coaching fail. This was a coaching fail because the players, like if I could give a shout out to the Lions really quick, they played their asses off to go into Santa Clara and be up 24-7 at halftime
against the number 1 seed.
Yeah. That's you should win that game. All of us thought the game was over, and it was Dan Campbell and the coaching staff that took that away from those boys. I'm grateful. Thank you, Dan Campbell.
Right, it worked out for you.
Works out for the fans, but you should not have lost that game. I told my wife I'm watching the game in shock, and I said Detroit is melting down, and because of Dan Campbell.
Yeah. So let's move on to the other side. We'll move on to the AFC Championship game where the Chiefs and Ravens, a little bit more of a close game. It was 17-10. I want to start with the Ravens first because I don't think there's a whole lot to say with the Chiefs other than they've been able to figure it out once again. They've been able to make it work. Every time it feels like we begin to doubt the Chiefs, Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes just come up with some new way to figure out how to make it work and win, even when their wide receivers can't catch for anything. On the other side, though, we have the Ravens. Lamar Jackson is finally able to lead his number 1 seeded Ravens to the AFC Championship game, something he hadn't been able to do. He got a lot of criticism for it. He's actually now 2-5 in the playoffs, unfortunately, due to this loss. He's up there with Dak Prescott, a couple other quarterbacks with that who have historically good regular season success, but playoff wise just cannot seem to be able to get it done. But I'm going to be honest with you, and looking at the statistics, I don't really put this on Lamar because it seems like Lamar showed up. The Baltimore Ravens defense showed up. The only people that didn't show up was the Baltimore receiving corps. The only person that did show up was Zay Flowers. He had 5 receptions, 150 yards, and a touchdown. Now, obviously, he did have the one taunting penalty that hurt them, that put the Chiefs, that got him a penalty, put him back a little bit. And then, of course, he tries to run it in the end zone. He ends up getting a fumble on that one, and the Chiefs recover it in the end zone for a touchback. What do you think the Ravens do at this point? Because they had a very talented team. They have a good young defense that's extremely talented in the secondary. They have Patrick Queen. They have Roquan Smith at the linebacking position. Offensively, you have Zay Flowers, who had a tremendous rookie year. Then you also have OBJ, who I think OBJ didn't pan out as well as a lot of people expected, and a lot of people that I expected OBJ to do a lot better when it came to signing with the Ravens. He ended up having 6 targets this game. He had 3 receptions for 22 yards, so he didn't really have a big impact on this game overall. As far as the overall season goes, is probably what was even more disappointing for OBJ. He was targeted 64 times. He got 35 receptions, 565 yards, and 3 touchdowns, which is an okay year for an OBJ who has historically been injured. He's 31 years old. He's coming off of a Super Bowl win with the Rams, but it just seemed like OBJ was a disappointment this year as well. To you, Jonathan, what does Lamar have to do at this point? Because, I mean, he did everything he was supposed to do. He led the team in rushing in the game. He was honestly fairly solid as far as his passing numbers go. He was 20 of 37. He had 272 yards. He had 1 touchdown. He had a pick, and he was sacked 4 times for 17-yard loss. And he had a QBR of 42.9, which isn't great. But, I mean, considering the fact that the only 2 people that had more than 3 receptions for a decent amount of yards was Zay Flowers and Justice Hill. Does this really fall back on Lamar then?
Well, here's where the conversation gets unfair, Tony, because yes, it does. Mm-hmm. And the reason is because Lamar Jackson is being paid like he's Patrick Mahomes. Yeah. When you are paid that amount of money, you are expected to pull through in these moments. You're expected to do what Brock did. You're expected to do what Patrick Mahomes did. That's what you're expected to do, especially when that thing that they're expecting you to do is your strength.
Yeah.
And so I can tell you from this standpoint here, this game was on Lamar Jackson because the defense did their job.
Yeah.
Kansas City was shut down in the second half. They did not score a point in the second half. Lamar Jackson had a 44 QBR, right? What did you say it was 40?
42.9. So the 43 basically.
So that's awful. I'm sorry. We have to call a spade a spade. That is terrible. That is terrible. I told my friend I was watching the game while I was going to pick my daughter up from her Girl Scouts meeting, and I watched the game from the first drive. I texted him after the first drive. I promise you this, and I said the Ravens are going to lose this game because already from the first drive, Lamar's running backwards away from the line of scrimmage. Every time he has done that in a game, they've lost the game. The San Francisco game, if you remember, in the beginning, he had a safety. Now the ref tripped him, but the ball was on the 15-yard line, and he ran back into the end zone and got a safety.
Yeah.
The defense is what kept the team, just like the Niners game, the defense is what kept the team in the game. The defense did their job. Lamar had the number one defense in the league. Lamar had the number one seed. He had the number one team. He had the favorite. He was at home, and he had the worst collection of a Chiefs team that we have seen in the last 6 years.
Yep.
He is paid like Patrick Mahomes. He has a rookie wide receiver that is going insane on the field. And instead of winning the game, he throws an interception in the end zone. He has a fumble behind the line because he's patting the ball 7 times. And he is not doing the one thing that has set him apart from every other quarterback in the league, which is using his legs.
Yes.
Yes, this one, Zay Flowers also didn't help. He had some boneheaded rookie mistakes, fumbling on the goal line, that taunting call that was absolutely unnecessary.
Yes.
But this one is on Lamar. And yes, it's unfair because it's a team game, but he is paid like Patrick Mahomes. He's expected to come through in these moments. And because of him directly, that team is at home.
Yeah. So let's move on because, like I said, the Chiefs can kind of be summarized as they've been able to figure out that they've been able to make it work. So let's move on to kind of our Super Bowl predictions. We'll probably dive a little bit deeper as it gets closer to the actual game time. Do you think because the Chiefs have figured it out and now the 49ers have also learned with Brock Purdy that they can make comebacks if they're down? This is a Chiefs team that, let's be realistic, if they're able to get ahead, they don't really make those kind of mistakes of letting a game slip. They're very much, when they have their foot on the gas pedal, they're flooring it and they're still going. Do you think now that it's a completely different team, two completely different teams as it was 4 years ago when we had the same matchup? Do you think the 49ers are going to be able to pull away this time because now you have a CMC? Brock Purdy is essentially an upgraded Jimmy Garoppolo that you don't have to worry about getting as hurt as often. And you still have a Chiefs team that may not be as weapon dangerous wise, still has Patrick Mahomes, still has Travis Kelce. And again, they've still managed to be able to figure out and make it work.
This is going to be the final exam for Brock Purdy and the Niners this year. This is the final exam. It's not the Ravens, it's the Chiefs. And it should be, because we all know that Patrick Mahomes is the best quarterback in the league.
Yeah.
We all know that Andy Reid is probably the best offensive coach in the league, but followed very closely by Kyle Shanahan. And the only reason that Kyle Shanahan is not considered above is because he hasn't won the big game. Right. Well, now he's got a chance. And Tony, I don't know how it's going to happen, but I think the Niners are going to win. This isn't me and my bias. I hope with all my heart that the Niners do win, but I think that this is the year for the 49ers to win. They've built the defense to show up in a game like this. They've been battle tested in the playoffs in the most extremely pressurized moments, and they've come out on top. the Chiefs haven't really been tested this playoff run. Not
Right.
really. I mean, they've
Yeah.
been on the road twice, but it was
Hmm.
against two teams that were fearful of the Chiefs. You could tell that right from the very beginning. They got away from their own game. The Niners don't do that. The
Yeah.
Niners do not get away from who they are. The problem is people just didn't think Brock Purdy was what he is.
Yeah.
I think
Here's
Andy Reid is smarter. The defense is smarter. And I just have a feeling that if the Niners can beat this Chiefs defense and put them on their heels, they're going to win this game.
here's the other thing that I worry about though, and I hate to bring it up because unfortunately they are a part of the game. And when there is mistakes after the game is over, we can say whether or not they were major factors as to whether or not the team could have potentially walked away with a win. Obviously, especially this year, there have been a ton of terrible referee called games, a lot of missed calls, a lot of calls that are thrown out that were like, wait a minute, why are you
Mm-hmm.
even calling this penalty? There was a lot of missed calls in that Chiefs versus Ravens game. I think
There
just about
were.
everybody can agree with that. It's like, wait a minute, you guys aren't even calling them anymore, and it's just
Mm-hmm.
blatantly obvious. I do kind of wonder, at least for the 49ers, because I will say, from what I've noticed, and I didn't watch a lot of 49ers games this year, you guys play a lot cleaner and a lot more disciplined, whereas the Chiefs a little bit more reckless, but they get kind of bailed out by the referees. Do you think that's going to potentially play a factor into whether or not you guys can take home the win? Because Trent Williams is a nasty dude. I remember watching him at Washington for a long time. I can't deny Trent Williams is a fantastic left tackle, has been a fantastic left tackle for years. Like I said, I watched him at Washington and I was like, man, between him and Brandon Sheriff, their right guard for the longest time. I was like, God, those are two of the nastiest dudes on Washington, and
Mm-hmm.
I hated having to deal with them every single time, but they were top of their game. Do you think that plays a factor into kind of the 49ers game plan and whether or not they can walk away with a win?
Yes, but the last time the Niners played the Chiefs, there were a lot of questionable non-holding calls on Nick Bosa.
Mm-hmm.
This year, I and again, I don't know why I think this. I think Bosa's coming out of this one on fire, and he's going to really wreck this game. He did
Yeah.
it against Detroit. He
Mm-hmm.
became the game wrecker in the second half. He
Yeah.
was in the backfield on every snap, and the Chiefs' offensive line is banged up. They lost their Pro Bowl or their All Pro center. They lost the right guard and their D line. They lost somebody on the D line to an ACL injury last game.
Mm-hmm.
If the Niners, if Nick Bosa is a game wrecker in the backfield, because the Niners have a better running back than the Chiefs do.
Yes.
The Niners have a better running back than the Chiefs do, and that left side, every time they've run up on the left side, it seems to be a big play.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily think the refs are going to be a big issue in this game as they were in years past. Um, I do think that the Chiefs lost some key pieces in that Ravens game that's going to make the difference. Now they still got Chris Jones and that guy is an animal, but the
Mm-hmm.
Niners have a lot of gnarly dudes that are healthy on that defensive line. And the recipe to beat Patrick Mahomes is get him off his spot, get him running away from the line. That's when he makes his mistakes.
Yeah.
I just have a feeling this defensive line is going to come out with their hair on fire. And the Chiefs, unfortunately, won't be able to contain them. And we're going to see a different Niners defense in this game in particular.
Okay. So let's move on to our next topic. Like I said, we'll dive deeper into the Super Bowl matchups as we get closer to the actual Super Bowl itself. Let's talk about this coaching carousel that has happened as we've started to get more and more hires throughout the league. I'm not going to dive into all of them because I honestly don't know a whole lot about some of them, and some of them
Sure.
I'm also looking at with like a really big question mark. Like, why did Tennessee hire Brian Callahan? I don't know, but that's who they're rocking with. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
but the three I wanted to touch base on, I feel, are the three best as far as candidates go that have accepted jobs. And for anybody that doesn't know, Ben Johnson, the offensive coordinator for the Lions, did say that he is actually going to stay another year because he wants to try to help get Detroit to a Lombardi. He did that last year even. He said, you know what? I feel like we have a really good thing going here. I want to stay. I want to see if they can continue to progress. And I'm going to be honest with you too. There's not a lot of good jobs left. So if I'm him, I'm like, I don't want to go to this bad position where they don't have a quarterback. Yes, they have a lot of salary cap, but that just means you can either re-sign players you've got, or you can go spend a ton of money in free agency, and that may or may not pan out well for you, because we've seen that work really well, and we've seen it not work so well, especially in the long-term game.
And next year is the year to come out if you're looking for a head coaching job.
Yes, because you're going to have a lot of potential teams. Two that are for sure potential spots is Dallas and Philadelphia, depending on what happens this next coming season with Mike McCarthy and Nick Sirianni. You have a lot of talent. You have a lot of key pieces, a lot of big markets. You have a ton of wiggle room with them. Then obviously we'll have other jobs and other positions available depending on how this coming season goes. But those are the two for sure that we already know. Depending on how this next season goes, those coaches may or may not be gone. Obviously, the big fish on the table, Jim Harbaugh leaves Michigan, goes to Los Angeles. The Chargers find their potential head coach. He's excited because he gets to work with Justin Herbert. He's also bringing his defensive coordinator from Michigan with him, Mentor, and the offensive strength and conditioning coach. He's also bringing him from Michigan with him as well. So you being a 49ers fan and Jim having been your previous coach led you to a Super Bowl at one point, a couple NFC championship games. Couldn't really get it figured out with Alex Smith, but was able to make it work on the fact that Colin Kaepernick was a freak athlete at the time. Do you think he really is the answer for Los Angeles, the Chargers being able to get the ship turned around? Like we've talked about, they have all the talent in the world. They have Joey Bosa. They have Nick's older brother. They have an aging Khalil Mack that's going to potentially cost them a lot of money. We'll see if they try to keep him or restructure his contract. Keenan Allen has been a top 10 wide receiver for a very long time, even though he may not get a lot of the love and appreciation that he probably deserves. They have Mike Williams. They have Eckler still, and obviously they have Herbert. They have Slater. They have Derwin James in the secondary. There's a lot of great young pieces here. Do you think Jim is the guy that can at least get them competitive? Because, I mean, you're going into probably the toughest coach division in the NFL right now with, Andy Reid and the Chiefs. You have Sean Payton and the Broncos. You have Antonio Pierce and the Raiders, who that's maybe a little bit has to be seen more proven because, I mean, last year they really didn't have anything to lose, so why not in a quarterback carousel as well. So what's your thoughts on Jim coming to Los Angeles?
Well, number one, I don't think that division is the toughest coach division in football. I think the AFC North with Harbaugh, Mike Tomlin, Kevin Stefanski, and Zach Taylor is a much tougher division coaching wise. Because as much as we love Antonio Pierce, he has not shown that he can even really coach the Raiders besides motivate them. And Sean Payton hasn't really shown us anything yet. So his accolades are really from Drew Brees and his past with the Saints still. That's number one. Number two, the thing about Jim Harbaugh's teams, if you look at every single team that he built, it was built on two things: defense and the run game. Everywhere he has gone, that is what he has built, which brings in Justin Herbert. That is going to be the question mark. And I am less high on Justin Herbert than everybody else is, apparently, because I seem to be the only one who remembers that Justin Herbert had a 20-point lead in the playoffs and lost to Trevor Lawrence
and
in the playoffs.
Yep.
And that's it. That's the only win that he has in the playoffs. That's the only playoff appearance he has ever had. And he has had a stacked team every single year that he's been playing.
Yeah.
Why we put him up in the elite quarterbacks when he has less playoff wins than Lamar and Dak and Kirk and Brock Purdy and Jared Goff and every other quarterback is beyond me. I can't understand it for the life of me. I think that is the joker in the Chargers deck is Justin Herbert. We got to start asking questions about Justin Herbert. You've got top flight receivers. Top flight receivers. Keenan Allen has been a beast in the league seemingly every single year. Mike Williams, beast in the league seemingly every single year. You got a Bosa on defense. You got Khalil Mack on defense. You got a stud running back. You got stud receivers coming out. The Chargers always seem to have good receivers. How are you not in the playoffs?
Yeah.
How did the Raiders make it to the playoffs before you?
Mm-hmm.
How is this possible? Because you look on the other side, I think we can say Keenan Allen is better than Debo, right? As a pure receiver.
Okay, yeah.
Definitely better than Ayuk.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Elijah Mitchell, when he was the Niners running back, Austin Eckler's way better than him.
Yeah.
So you've had the team. You've had the team that you need to make it in the playoffs. And we can't even say, well, he's in a bad division. The Raiders have been awful for the last ever years. The Raiders have been terrible. The Broncos have been terrible for the last ever years. How are you not making it to the playoffs? How is it that CJ Stroud can come into the league and go to Houston with receivers whom we don't even know their names besides Robert Woods, and he's old? And they made it to the playoffs. Not only did they make it to the playoffs, they beat the number 1 ranked defense in the playoffs.
Wholeheartedly. And even kept it close with the Ravens in the first half.
Just beat the Browns. Like, they told the Browns they don't even belong on the field.
Mm-hmm. So
CJ Stroud, rookie.
Mm-hmm.
How is it that Justin Herbert can't make it to the playoffs?
Who's been fantastic, and I think has also, again, this is just his rookie year. I'm much of the, I want to see how you are in 3 years before I can say whether or not you're truly a good quarterback or not, unless you do something just, exponentially crazy. We'll see how that
Which he hasn't.
Yeah, not yet, but there's still a lot of potential, and if his rookie year's and any indication, he's going to have a great NFL career. Here's what I am.
Again, he has more playoff wins than Justin Herbert.
True. Now, I am going to defend Justin a little bit because, funny enough, a good friend of mine at work, Michael is also not a big Justin Herbert fan. He's like, I don't get it. I don't see it. He's like, he puts up all these numbers. Justin kind of reminds me a lot of, and it's going to sound crazy, and I may or may not get criticized for this. He reminds me a lot of Matt Stafford in Detroit, because if you remember, Matt Stafford had crazy weapons in Detroit for a little bit. Yes, one of them was Calvin Johnson. He did have Golden Tate there for a little bit. He had a really good defense for a while. The thing that hurt Matt Stafford, and I think the thing that has hurt Justin Herbert, is coaching. Justin really hasn't had any good coaches.
Can I give you another comparison?
Sure.
Phillip Rivers.
Yeah.
The difference is Phillip Rivers actually made it to the playoffs.
That's true. But
Matt Stafford, we can his organization that he was with in Detroit was awful.
Yes.
The Chargers organization is not awful.
They're not awful, but as we've seen, the ownership, especially because it's also owned by, I believe, all the kids now of Spanos. Right. It's not actually owned by one individual person, I think kind of plays into it. But we've also seen the Chargers go through a big coaching carousel as well. They haven't had a consistent coach for a hot minute. They had Staley. I don't even remember who they had before this. Anthony Glenn.
Anthony Glenn, yes.
Anthony Glenn, who he's great for Detroit as a coordinator, but just can't do it as a coach. And again, we've seen that just like Detroit, they're able to at least buy the talent or get the talent traded into them or draft them.
Mm-hmm.
But I think for Herbert, a lot of it has been the coaching. Because again, like you said, it's not for lack of weapons. He can statistically put up the numbers, albeit garbage time, but he can put up the numbers. And again, I think a lot of that kind of goes into the fact that look how aggressive Staley was going for it a lot of times too. Like, wait a minute, what are you doing? Stop being so aggressive and just play it a lot smarter.
I have to push back a little bit because Justin Herbert is the quarterback.
He is.
He's the one calling the plays. I mean, he's the one at the line. He is smart enough, I think, to make the audibles that he needs to.
Right.
I think here's the thing with Harbaugh. If you don't play it in the way that he wants to play it, he'll replace you.
Yeah.
He will replace you. I love Jim Harbaugh. He's one of the best coaches I think we've seen in this era,
Yeah.
honestly. Because everywhere he's gone, he's won. Everywhere. San Diego State, Stanford, everywhere. Michigan, San Francisco, everywhere he's gone, he's won. So if the Chargers don't make some noise this year, it's not because of Harbaugh.
Yeah.
And I think they're going to run into a little bit of a problem in the beginning, because if you remember when Jim Harbaugh got to Michigan, they were putting up numbers, but they were losing to the elite teams in their conference. They were losing to Ohio State multiple times. They were losing to Michigan State multiple times. And I will say that Jim Harbaugh has a tendency to kind of overhype the team and fail in big moments. And they've got an elite quarterback in their conference that they got to play twice a year. So in the beginning, they're probably going to be second in the conference to the Chiefs because they have better coaching and a better quarterback. This is why I'm saying Justin Herbert, we're going to come to midnight on Justin Herbert here this season because you've got elite receivers. Some of them are coming back healthy. You've got an elite running back. You've got elite people on defense. Apparently, you've got the elite arm. Now you have an elite coach.
Yeah.
So the blame's going to go somewhere, and I don't think Harbaugh's going to take it.
Yeah, it will be interesting to see because Justin probably has been the best quarterback that he's had for a very, very long time. And that's even better than Alex Smith, because I think you know better than anybody being a 49ers fan. Alex was good, but it just seemed like he couldn't get over the hump, and kind of the same thing. It just seemed like he didn't really mesh with Jim very well. Kaepernick wasn't bad, but we all know what Kaepernick was. He was a better runner than he was of a passer. He could run like we saw against Green Bay in the postseason with Kaepernick. He ran 256 yards on them with no problem. So it will be interesting to see what he does with Justin. Maybe he tries to make Justin a little bit more athletic, use his legs. We'll find out. The other one I wanted to kind of bring up, because I brought this up to somebody and they pushed back on it pretty hard. And I don't think it's an insult to him as a coach, but I just think that it's weird he's getting the chance now. And that's Raheem Morris getting hired by Atlanta to be their head coach. For people who don't know Raheem very well, he was the head coach of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers for 2009 to 2011. He went 3-13. He went 10-6. He was third in the NFC South that 2010 year. They actually missed out on the playoffs. One of the few times that a 10-6 team didn't make the playoffs just because everybody else was so good that year. Then went 4-12 and was fired at the end of that season. And then was the interim head coach for Atlanta in 2020 after Dan Quinn went 0-5 that 2020 season. He took over, led them to 4-7. They finished last in the division. And of course, they ended up hiring Arthur Smith shortly after. To me, the pushback that I got was, well, in his defense in Tampa Bay, he had Josh Johnson as his quarterback. Josh Johnson really wasn't terrible for Tampa Bay. I'm not going to sit here and say he was going to be the difference maker. He was going to be the guy to lead
Josh
them. Freeman? Or Josh Freeman. Josh Freeman, you're right. I don't know why I thought Josh Johnson was probably there at some point as his quarterback. But yeah, Josh Freeman wasn't a bad quarterback. I'm not going to sit here and say he was great. I'm not going to sit here and say he was going to potentially be the long-term solution answer. But I mean, he wasn't as terrible as everybody made him out to be. I mean, Tampa Bay has been basically just that franchise with Detroit, with Cleveland, that has just been historically bad for a long, long time. Even since their inception, they've been bad. But they managed to get 2 Super Bowls. So yeah, it's more than what most franchises can say. But I just thought it was weird, the fact that he was an interim coach. He went 4-7. They interviewed him to potentially be the head coach, decided not to go with him because he's a defensive guy. Obviously, they were going to want an offensive guy to take over since they just finished with Dan Quinn. But I feel like he wasn't really given a fair shot with Atlanta because, I mean, they have just a curse hanging over them. Now he can go ahead.
I think this was a terrible hire. Terrible hire. Yeah, the league has shown you what actually makes it to the big game, and that is offensive coaching. An
Yes.
offensive head coach makes it to the AFC championships, even.
Hmm.
That is what makes it deep in the playoffs. You look over the last few years, who has made it consistently to the playoffs? Kyle Shanahan, Andy Reid, Sean McVay.
Yep.
Consistently.
Yep.
And then you'll get a defensive guy, one defensive guy,
Pete
who's a
Carroll.
Bills coach,
Oh,
Pete
Sean
Carroll,
McDermott.
Sean McDermott, who have superstar quarterbacks that are just able to carry the team up there. Other than that, it's all offensive guys. This
Yeah.
year, with the exception of the Bills coach and John Harbaugh, who was a special teams guy, it's all offensive guys.
Yeah.
The defensive ones got eliminated early.
Hmm.
Besides maybe a Kevin Stefanski, but Joe Flacco's old. Like he was brought in to kind of bridge the gap. This is what is making it in the league. How is it that you look at Kyle Shanahan, who's been to what, 4 of the last 5 NFC Championship games with
Hmm.
Jimmy Garoppolo and the last pick of the draft? You got
Hmm.
Andy Reid, who is making it to 6 straight AFC Championship games
Hmm.
in a row. You're
Yep.
looking at Sean McVay, who's making it. You're looking at Kevin Stefanski, who's an offensive guy, turning the Browns around, made it with Baker Mayfield. How is it that you are hiring a defensive coach?
Yeah.
What are you doing? Not only just a defensive coach, wasn't he the defensive coach for the Rams?
He was for the Rams, and then the Rams is where he's really made his money the last couple of years.
But how was their defense last year? Were they a world-beating defense?
They were pretty good. I don't remember their statistics. I can look it up real quick. But
They
overall,
were
I
they
mean,
were
they were better than what a lot of people expected. We'll put it
but
that
they
way.
lost to the Lions.
Yes. Yes, they did.
I mean, it feels like it was a shotgun hire. It was we missed out on the guy that we actually wanted, and we need somebody in here for right now. So let's just
Yep.
hire this guy, give him whatever money. See, we're not going to win the division
Hmm.
because, or I mean, that division is awful anyway. So we're not going to win the division. If we go to the playoffs, we're probably going to get eliminated early. It's house money at that point. Let's just bring them in here, and then we'll wait for next year when all these coaches are coming out. Maybe we can get Ben Johnson. It just doesn't make sense. You're in a division that is open for the taking.
Yeah.
Open for the taking. The Buccaneers, they made it to the playoffs, but let's be serious. We were happy that the Buccaneers were even in the divisional round. When they beat Philly, it was like, okay, you've accomplished this year. You've got the Falcons, who are terrible. You've got the
Hmm.
Saints, who are terrible. And you've got the Panthers, who don't even belong on the mentions board because they're that terrible.
Yes.
Why are you hiring somebody who cannot? And it's not like the Falcons don't have talent. They've
Oh
got
yeah.
talent. They have a good defense.
They have a good defense. I think this is where I think it's not fair for Raheem because he's once again put in a really bad situation. Before with 2020, you had Matt Ryan at the end of his career. Now they don't really have a quarterback. You have Desmond Ritter, you have Taylor Heineke, who obviously showed last year between the both of them. Yeah, we can get you 7 wins, but that's not going to get you into the playoffs.
Right.
They're sitting at number 8 as far as the draft picks this year. And it's funny because as I'm looking at all of these mock drafts, it's crazy at how I've seen 3 so far, and every single one of them has Atlanta taking Dallas Turner, the edge out of Alabama, instead of taking a quarterback. They have obviously Caleb Williams going top. They have Drake May. They have Jaden Daniels.
Jaden Daniels. Yep.
They they have Malik Neighbors. I've seen a couple people and a couple ones after the Falcons make their pick. This one has Bo Nix going to the Saints. I saw one has Bo Nix going to the Broncos. I haven't seen any try to go for Michael Penix yet, and I haven't seen any try to go for. I'm trying to think. There's a 5th quarterback. Let's see, Daniels May. Yeah, Williams, Daniels May, Nick's Penix. Okay, so really the 5 most realistic quarterbacks that I would take. So it's like, why would they take an edge rusher when yes, they need it. I didn't really see Dallas Turner making that big of an impact for Alabama this year. Alabama had a really down year, why wouldn't you want to go try to get a Bo Nix?
You
As
would
much
if
as
you had an offensive coach. When you got a
that's
defensive
true,
coach, you pay attention to defense.
true,
What's Raheem Morris going to do with Bo Nix or Penix? He doesn't know how to coach quarterbacks.
true. It'll be interesting to see what he's able to do as far as who he gets for his offensive coordinator, because I feel like that's going to make a big difference too. And I've said this about a lot of defensive coaches: is defensive coaches are only successful if they have an offensive partner that they can trust. Like, look at how successful Bill Belichick was for so many years, and even honestly, look at how successful he was with Mac Jones's rookie year, because he had Josh McDaniels calling the offense for him. Bill didn't ever have to worry about the offense.
But you also need, for defensive coaches, you need that guy at quarterback.
Yes.
And they don't have that. So unless
Nope.
they get a quarterback as a rookie, but rookie quarterbacks work best with what? Offensive-minded head coaches. You got a defensive guy. You've got mock drafts are almost always wrong.
Yep.
Every year, somebody jumps up in the draft. Every year, somebody slides down. They're almost always wrong. So let's just say they do pick a quarterback. Who's the offensive coordinator in Atlanta?
That's a great question. I don't even think they have one at the moment.
Exactly. This is going to be a problem. So they're going to it's going to look like Carolina. They're going to throw a rookie back there, no offensive coordinator of any merit, and say, take us there. And he's going to get destroyed because he's a rookie. And he doesn't have any coaching to help him out with that. There's no offensive game plan that works. It's chuck and duck all the time, running away from the line all the time. Whoever lands there is going to have a hell of a time making an impact in the league. And it's really sad because they've got weapons. This organization has not done what is necessary to make sure that they set this team up to take control of the NFC South, because it is there to be taken. It is there to be taken. The most competitive quarterback in that division is Baker Mayfield.
Yep.
Baker Mayfield, another 2 playoff win quarterback. It's right there. But instead, Atlanta decided to pull at the hip and just hire whomever, and they hired a defensive guy. And what has the history been with defensive-minded coach hirings? How's Robert Saleh doing?
Yeah. Another guy that great defense, but they reached the Jets. I feel like the Jets were worse than Atlanta because the Jets didn't have as attractive as weapons. So even if he does get a quarterback rookie, it's hard to not succeed when you have a Drake London, when you have a Bijan, and you have a Kyle Pitts. It's kind of hard not to succeed. Not saying they're going to do great, not saying they're going to win the division, but it's kind of hard. The Jets, even if Zach Wilson wasn't a total reach and a bust like I said he was when they drafted him, and I was laughing and I was also mad because I was like, wait a minute, you guys are taking Zach Wilson. You mean to tell me you guys think Zach Wilson is better than Justin Fields and better than Mac Jones?
It turns out they were right. He is better than both of those guys.
I say he's on the same level. I give Justin a little bit more of a pass than I do Mac and Zach, but yeah.
Justin Fields is like 15 and 30 something as a starter in the league.
Yeah, it's bad. It's real bad. But again, another organization that primarily goes for only defense. They don't go for offense. They don't get him any weapons, so he's kind of in a bad spot. And it was also another one of those, I was like, well, if he goes to the Jets, he's also at a career ender because the Jets also aren't going to help him and get him any type of an offense or any type of weapons either.
Well, the Jets do have a star corner, and they have a star receiver, and they have a star running back.
Yes, they do.
They get an offensive line. Now they have I guess we'll call Aaron Rodgers a star, even though he seems to carry toxicity with him wherever he goes. They have a quarterback. They got a receiver. They got a running back. Their defense is actually really good.
Oh, it's solid.
So they just need that guy at quarterback. The Jets are in a better position than the Falcons or the Bears.
I would push back a little because I think Atlanta's offensive line is 10 times better than the Jets O-line. The Jets O-line is terrible. Their 2 starting tackles, their starting tackle was Dwayne Brown, who is almost 40.
He's old, right?
Way past his prime. You have Mekhi Becton, who is young, he's big, he's strong, but he's constantly injured and he's constantly hurt. He's not there. They have Elijah Vera Tucker, who is I believe, left guard, very solid rookie young prospect, but again, getting hurt because he's having to overplay because the rest of the offensive line is garbage. I was telling people all last year when Rodgers first came there, I was like, the Jets are not going to be good. Yes, they are. They have Aaron Rodgers. He has, Garrett Wilson. He's going to be solid. He has Brees Hall, but he doesn't have an offensive line to protect him. And obviously, we saw it 4 plays in. He's having to scramble and he gets hurt, albeit freak accident, but because his offensive line is trash. But I would put Atlanta as, again, maybe not with coaching, but the offensive line, I would put the offensive line right at about 15 or 16. It's, I would say, probably average, maybe a little bit above average. The weapons wise, I would put it probably about a B, and a defense that I would also put at about a B minus. Like, they're not bad. I would put them as a more attractive destination than the Jets, only because with the Jets, you're going to have to face Buffalo, you're going to have to face Miami, albeit however that decides to go with them. You have significantly better players, significantly better quarterbacks, where, like you said, the NFC South is wide open for the taking. Your only real
And the
competition
Jets
is
have a
Baker
history
Mayfield.
of being terrible organizationally.
Yes.
And they've been one of the worst organizations along with the Browns for as long as we can remember. So,
Yes.
yeah. However, the Falcons they seem to be on that trajectory of being a terribly organized NFL organization. The fact that you would hire a defensive guy, I promise you, it sounds like they had their mind on somebody and it fell through, and now they just needed somebody, so they hired him because Arthur Smith left.
Well, I think the other thing too that I think they really wanted Belichick, but I don't know if you heard or saw the reports, but pretty much Art Smith, the owner of the Falcons, and his GM, his vice president, everybody underneath him was like, we do not want Bill Belichick as the head coach. And he was trying every way in the world to get it to happen, and it didn't. But I do wonder if maybe it wasn't trying to get Jim as the big fish. When Jim didn't work out, maybe they were trying to reach out to Ben Johnson. Maybe they were trying to wait until after the playoffs, obviously, because they don't want to get accused of tampering or anything like that. And then when he said that he was going to stay, they're like, okay, well, we'll get Raheem. Or maybe he let them know early on, I'm not going to leave. So but
that's what it sounds like to me. I
but the
don't see
world,
any other reason why you would hire a defensive coach right now.
but the world may never know, or we may find out next year. Who knows? But the third one that I feel is the most interesting is the Seattle Seahawks have a new head coach in Mike McDonald, the former Ravens defensive coordinator. So the Seahawks sticking with a defensive-minded coach. This is his first time ever head coaching other than high school.
I love this one.
I say I'm a big fan. You know, he was great as defensive coordinator for Michigan. He was actually he was a defensive assistant for the Ravens. He was the defensive back coach for them, the linebackers coach, went to Michigan for a year and then came back and was the defensive coordinator for the Ravens. So he's been with the Ravens for an extremely long time, and we could tell because of how well that defense was coached this year. And again, I also want to give a shout out to another guy that may or may not get as much praise. And honestly, he may or may not end up becoming the defensive coordinator for the Seahawks because Philly's spot filled up. And that's their defensive back coach of Denard Wilson, because obviously we saw him do great work with Philly, not this past season because their secondary was god awful, but the year they went to the Super Bowl this past season against the Chiefs, they were fantastic against this. They had a fantastic secondary against the pass, and a lot of that is attributed to Denard Wilson. And so now Mike McDonald goes to Seattle. I wouldn't be surprised if he poaches him with him, but that's part of why I'm excited. Why are you excited about this hire?
Because of the same reasons that I was talking about the Falcons hiring a defensive coach. Yeah. So this, let me get this straight. Brock Purdy has emerged as the offensive elite, better quarterback in this division. You got Sean McVay, who's also an offensive guy. You got Kyle Shanahan, who's an offensive genius. And you're going to hire a defensive guy? I love this. I love this because it sets the 49ers up to be in control of the NFC West for the foreseeable future. Matt Stafford's only getting older. Brock Purdy's only going to get better. And now we have Seattle with two defensive mindsets in the organization on an offensive league where they don't have an elite quarterback, they don't have an elite running back, they don't have an elite O-line, and they don't even have an elite defense. This is great. This is fantastic. I was jumping up and down in my living room when I heard that Seattle, instead of going with where the league is going, they decided to go, you know what? You guys can win the Super Bowls. I'm going to stick to what I know. And that is defense. I loved it. I love it. Love
Okay.
it.
Okay.
Geno Smith and who else? Drew Lock. Yes. Give me a big dose of that.
And then, of course, the last thing I want to touch on, because again, my good buddy Michael, who I work with, he is a Washington Commanders fan, and that is the last coaching job that is currently available as we speak. Dan Quinn, apparently, since Seattle ended up going with Mike McDonald, Seattle is now off the list of potentially bringing back Dan Quinn. There are rumors, there's a lot of theories, and I believe Dan has interviewed with Washington, but Washington has not hired anybody yet, and it doesn't seem as if they are looking to quickly hire anyone. Obviously, Dan Quinn's out there is a big name. The Texans offensive coordinator, Bobby's, I think, Slouk, however you enunciate his name, he re-signed with the Texans, so that's another big name gone. Really, your last two big names that I can think of off the top of my head are Bill and Dan are the only two left. Again, another two defensive-minded guys after you just fired your defensive coach of Ron Rivera. I want to be honest. If I'm any coach right now, I'm staying away from Washington. And I know Michael's going to hate me for that. He's probably going to talk some smack, but he does know ball and he's pretty realistic. Washington does not have a lot of attractiveness to it. Yes, they have a new owner. There's a lot of upside for the future. They have Terry McLaurin. They have Jahan Dotson. You know, there's a lot of potential. They have Jonathan Allen and Deron Payne on the interior line. But you got rid of Montez Sweat. You traded him to the Bears. You traded Chase Young to the 49ers. Your secondary is still pretty awful. Your linebacking core is not really there. You don't have a great offensive line. You really don't have any young offensive pieces on the offensive line at that. Sam Howell is obviously not the guy at quarterback. And yes, you have Antonio Gibson, you have Brian Robinson Jr. at running back, but again, they're not what they were that 2020 season when they ended up winning the NFC East with a losing record and, you know, being really the only team to take Tom Brady and the Buccaneers that season to their limit.
Mm-hmm.
Is there another name or is there anybody you think that would maybe give Washington a shot as far as being their head coach?
No. Because if you give Bill Belichick a contract, it's going to come with stipulations. He's going to want complete control. He's going to want a long-term deal. And then Dan Quinn, I mean, that's the whole defensive coach thing. Maybe they hire an offensive guy from college. Maybe. I mean,
now there is actually a name now that I think about it that they could hire within, because as far as I know, he hasn't been let go or fired. But they also, it doesn't seem as if they've been quick to give him the job either. They do still have Eric Bieniemy.
Now that would probably be the way to go.
Yeah.
That would probably be what I would do if I was Washington, because at least you have an offensive guy, and you're high enough up on the draft board that you could probably get a quarterback that's serviceable.
They're number 2. So unless Chicago doesn't get Caleb Williams for whatever reason, or if they don't trade away and somebody else picks him, they pretty much have the pick of the litter as far as who they want.
Well, that's what I would do if I was Washington, to see if you can trade up and get Caleb. That's what I would do if I was Washington. See if you can trade up and get Caleb. Now, me personally, I'm not sold on Caleb Williams like everybody else is.
I'm not either.
I'm really not. USC has a track field for receivers. You kind of pull and pray there. From what I saw of Caleb, he doesn't really have the mental resilience to deal with the NFL.
Yep.
he doesn't seem to have the physical attributes that you look for in an NFL franchise quarterback. It's
Mhm.
basically, I mean, on the highest end, if he has the work ethic, you're looking at a ceiling of Lamar Jackson. On the lower end, you're looking at a floor of Justin Fields. It's kind of that archetype of a quarterback.
Because
But I mean, who do you have better in Washington?
yeah, here's what I would say too, though, because I'm not a big Caleb Williams fan either. From what I've watched at USC, not this past season, but season before last when he won the Heisman, he had terrific numbers. Obviously, they lost to Utah twice, which is what ended up getting them the boot out of the playoffs.
Mm-hmm.
This year, he still had really good numbers, but they lost so many games. Now, albeit, yes, his defense is about as tough as a wet paper bag, but at the same time as well, it seemed as if he couldn't really overcome the adversity of major losses to good teams.
Right.
He lost to Notre Dame. You figure, okay, he's probably going to bounce back again. Statistically, Caleb really wasn't the problem. Statistically, he's been about the same as he has been his entire time being at USC. But it's like your only win was against Cal, and then you lost every single other game that you played in,
And barely won against Cal
and
at
barely
that.
won. Yeah, you only won
I'm pretty
against
sure
like
they
one
beat
point.
Arizona
Yeah.
by like triple overtime or something like that. My
Mm-hmm.
thing is, the thing that really gives me cause to pause is the reaction to, I believe it was the Utah loss, where he jumps up into the stands and he's crying
Mm-hmm.
with his family in the stands. Normally, yeah, okay, fine. You lose a big game. We saw Debo Samuel cry in the NFC Championship game.
Yeah.
Players are going to cry.
Yeah.
But the season's not over at that point. You're
Yeah.
just not going to the playoff. And you kind of knew that with the way that your defense was playing. Did you
Mm-hmm.
really think USC was going to be able to keep pace with Alabama or Michigan or Texas? Not a
Nope.
chance. They were going to get blown off the field by all three of those teams. They would have
Yep.
gotten blown off the field by Florida State, the way that
Mm-hmm.
defense was.
Yep.
So, I mean, you kind of, if you're Caleb, you look just realistically looking at the way that your team is playing and what you have to do to pull that team up and make it competitive. You're not going to go into the playoff with these great teams and even hold a candle. Why are you crying in the stands? You're going to the NFL.
Yeah.
If you think, like I played football, if you think that those players in the locker room did not look at him sideways at the way that he reacted to that game, I promise you are wrong, because that is full of alphas who have mental resilience. They react in anger when they're upset. You can't do that. That's a bad look. And even in the press conference, he's like, I want to go home and cuddle my dog. When I first saw that on Twitter, I thought somebody had made a video, you
Like the
know.
AI, and they like
Yeah,
photoshopped over it, or they cropped it in there.
that's what I thought it was. So I'm scrolling through to find the real interview, and all of them are saying that. And I'm like, what? What? You're the quarterback? You're the
Mm-hmm.
quarterback. And this is how you're reacting to a loss? It's not a good look. And so
No.
now you're going into the NFL. You're going to go to a bad team,
Mm-hmm.
and they're
That
going to
you're gonna have to
look to you
carry
to be the franchise guy, and you're over there wanting to cuddle your. Come on, dude. Like,
that.
I
That was one of my biggest takeaways. Was I don't mind if you're passionate. I don't mind if you get upset. There's a time and there's a place though for that. And my biggest argument has been, even for a lot of these college kids, because yes, it's emotional. Yes, it is a battle. It's taxing both mentally and physically. You don't want to do it, especially when essentially now with college, you're interviewing for your professional job. Like your
right.
entire college gameplay is that. And like you said, if you go in the NFL with a bunch of these, grown men, they're gonna be like, wait a minute, like not only are you a kid and we have to look to you for leadership and to lead the team, but then you're acting like this,
Now you're weak mentally. Right.
and there's gonna be a lot of guys like, I'm not holding your hand, kid. Like you're gonna have to
Right.
eventually step up and grow up. The other thing that has kind of made me hesitant, and again, I don't know if this is truly confirmed or not, because the only place I can find this is like Twitter and Facebook, and that's about as accurate as nothing, is supposedly he has stated what cities, what organizations he does not want to play for. Supposedly he wanted certain assurances that Chicago would not draft him number 1 overall. Otherwise, he was going to stay at USC, which I'm like, easy there, buddy. The other thing is too, and I know a lot of people brought it up with Eli Manning did this with the Giants of I'm just not going to play for you. To me, it starts to set up a bad precedent,
For
mainly
sure.
for the league and for the NFL, because then at that point, you're giving a lot of the players and especially these young kids this idea that the draft really doesn't matter. Because okay, it doesn't matter if you become the number 1 overall pick. I can just say I don't want to play for you and I'll just wait until, I get to go to the team that I want to go, which don't get me wrong, on a personal level, I get that. If Washington was to call me and be like, "Hey, you're going to be our quarterback," I would be like, no thanks. I don't want my professional career to die in like 4 years. No, no thanks. I'm good. I'll just retire. I won't even worry about it." But that it sets up such a dangerous precedence when doing that. And again, if you, and to me as well, if you had proven that you had done something in college, like if you led them and won the Pac-12 championship and you were able to go into the playoffs, not saying you have to win the national title, not even saying you've got to do that, but if you could show me that, hey, I'm that guy, I just maybe get beat by a better team, okay, I can make that argument. You didn't win anything. You didn't do anything in Oklahoma because you were in a quarterback carousel with Spencer Rattler when Lincoln Riley was deciding that he was going to leave
Right.
Oklahoma.
Right.
Yes, you win the Heisman, which is impressive. We've seen a lot of guys win the Heisman. We've seen a lot of guys win the Heisman. They go into the NFL and they're terrible. And then you followed up with statistically you had a good year, but you didn't win anything. You didn't do anything spectacular in the Pac-12, especially when the Pac-12 stepped up all of its competition and was probably one of the toughest conferences to play in this past season. So it's like
we talked about that earlier. This is kind of what the whole deal with the NIL. This is the problem that the NIL has caused the NFL. Because now Caleb can make more money staying in college than he can on his rookie deal in the NFL. And now we're having this sense of entitlement here, because that's really what it is a sense of entitlement. I'm better than thou situation here. And now Caleb's saying, I'm not going to go to this organization or that organization. And it should be you're lucky to make it into the NFL. There's only so many of these positions, and every year another quarterback's going to come and try and take your spot. That's how rare it is. But because of NIL, now he can make more money sitting and waiting for the right team to come and offer him better or whatnot. So this is kind of the after effect of allowing NIL to happen. This is another reason why I just don't understand what the hype is with Caleb Williams. I really, really don't. You juxtapose this to a guy like Penix, who he didn't start off as one of these glorified guys coming out of college. He worked. He went to Indiana and had to grind. And then he got recruited by his coach to Washington and had to grind and prove himself on the field. And even in the Natty, he had to grind and prove himself on the field. But everybody's heralding Caleb Williams like he's some world beater, and he's not.
Yep.
This is it's just another notch on the why Caleb sweepstakes, and I just don't understand why. Like, I'm starting to think that there's something going on behind the scenes as to why we're pumping this kid up who has never even made it to the playoff. He hasn't won. Has he won the Pac-12? I don't think he's won.
He's been in the championship game last year against Utah, but then they lost to Utah for the second time that season.
Right. I just don't. They didn't win the Big 12. Like, I don't understand. What actually, you know what? I understand what it is. It's everybody's trying to find another Patrick Mahomes, and he just doesn't exist because Caleb is damn sure not Patrick Mahomes.
And it's funny because that's what I've heard everybody try to put his comparison to is of Patrick Mahomes, because he makes the athletic throws. He does all this. It's like you said, he's got track stars for wide receivers at USC. You're with Lincoln Riley, who, if anything, Lincoln Riley he's a very good college football offensive guru. 100% undeniable. So it's like, yeah, you're going to have a lot of quarterbacks that can potentially look that good. But I mean, I'm right there with you. I haven't seen the hype as much with Caleb. I really haven't seen the hype with Drake May. And oh my goodness,
Yeah, I don't understand the Drake May one.
I've seen so many people about Drake May, and I'm sitting here again. I'm going to be a bit of a biased LSU Tigers fan. Why is Jaden Daniels not at least up there ahead of Drake May?
He is. He should be ahead of Drake May for sure, especially given Drake May's injury history. But Jaden Daniels actually played in a conference with the best athletes in the sport, and he competed. So I think he will, when it's all said and done, he'll probably be the first or second quarterback taken off the board. Obviously, people are going to feed into the hype with Caleb, but I think Jaden Daniels is the next one to go because at the very least, he competed with the best in the sport at his level, whereas Caleb Williams did not ever in his whole time in college. He never played against the best in the sport. The best in the sport are in the SEC or the Big Ten. That's where the best of the best are in college football. Caleb Williams has never been able to compete with those guys. So I do think I'm with you on Jaden Daniels. At least he won the Heisman and he showed that he can compete and he has mental fortitude to bounce back because he had some bad games and he bounced back and he showed some mettle. William Penix would be the next one off the board for me. Bo Nix would probably be the third. I don't understand Drake May. And I really don't understand Caleb Williams. I really, really don't.
Yeah, and keep in mind, this past season, Daniels threw for 3,800 yards. He rushed for over 1,100 yards, had 10 rushing touchdowns, 40 passing touchdowns, so 50 total touchdowns this year. And yeah, is at least on a lot of mock drafts that I've seen, is going third behind Caleb Williams, Drake May, and is potentially supposed to go to New England as the third quarterback off the board. But yeah, I haven't seen the hype again. I'm a little biased being an LSU fan. I've watched Jaden Daniels. Heck, he won the SEC West his first year with first year coach Brian Kelly at LSU. Beat Bama in Baton Rouge. So I mean, he's proven he can beat good teams. He's proven he can do it with both in the air and on the ground. But yeah, I don't see the hype, but we'll see how it all goes. We'll find out here in April. Find out. Because Justin Fields might get traded to Atlanta. He might stay. They might trade the number 1 pick. Who knows? We will find out. But Jonathan, it's been great as usual. Again, let everybody know where they can find you if they want to hear you as far as sports goes. And obviously, I know you're a musician. But for anybody else who wants to find your musical talents, let them know where they can find you at, man.
For sports, I'm on X or Twitter or whatever we call it nowadays as Miller Time JK. And for music, I am Jonathan K on Instagram, Facebook, all the music sites. I am Jonathan K is my little @. And I right now I'm all into sports, obviously, because my team's in the Super Bowl. So if you want to talk trash to me, tell me where I'm wrong. Miller Time JK on Twitter.
Okay. And then, of course, you can always find me on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok at Inside the Hoosier Mind, on X, formerly known as Twitter, at IN Hoosier Mind. And, of course, you can find this podcast anywhere where you find podcasts at, on Spotify, Apple, Google Podcasts, Pandora, iHeartRadio, all of them. We're on all of it. But again, Jonathan, appreciate you coming on, man. Like I said, we'll talk a little bit next week as far as who we think's going to win. I already know you're probably picked for who you're going to have win the Super Bowl, but we'll dive into that a little bit deeper next week.
I might surprise you.
Okay. Well, we will find out next week. Hope everybody has a great night. Hope everybody enjoyed the show, and we will see y'all next time.